TSM struggles continue. J&T and I will go over who we think is holding back TSM, which player or players. We'll get into that a little bit later in the show. Also, recently, Monty and Thorin, as usual, get into some discussions, and this time it's around should minor region players count as imports? We'll get into that in just a second. And then also, as we discuss all the LCS teams, as always, we will get into how FlyQuest managed to pull off a 2-0 week. I'm Blue Jay, joined by JNT250 as always for episode 91 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. JNT, I know the games didn't start so good this weekend. How did you think they ended?
Well, yeah, Saturday was pretty horrible. It was pretty much a day full of one-sided affairs, except for the FlyQuest versus Dignitas game, which I think it was like pretty entertaining. I thought, mainly because Takui was just kind of smurfing the entire game. He was just kind of 1v9ing on Corki. It was pretty apparent in that game specifically that both teams were just willing to let their mid laners scale, and Dignitas was kind of hoping, it's like, oh yeah, we have the Soul win con, we're gonna be good, right? And then they lost they lost the drag on Soul Point, then they lost the next one, and then they got wiped, and FlyQuest got Baron, and then they ended up getting the Soul, but they lost the game to a backdoor. So I don't know.
That game was really exciting. It was worrying, like watching, because a few of them were pretty snoozer on Saturday. So you kind of worry about weekends like that, and then Sunday obviously got a lot better. But we will get into all of those games. Before we do, we wanted to talk about the theory, if you want to call it, that Monty has about about minor region players potentially not counting as imports for any major region. JT, you want to fill in any gaps I may have missed on that?
Yeah, so people have no idea what we're talking about. This came up on Summoning Insight, which is a show that MonteCristo and Thorin do on that channel. I think it's weekly. I'm not exactly sure. I don't personally watch the show, so don't quote me on that.
I don't know either.
But something that drew the attention of Front Page Reddit was a big topic that they discussed on the show, which was Monty saying he has and also, please listen to me as I say this, a quote-unquote informed theory. The key word there obviously is theory, but him saying informed theory makes it seem like he is basing this whole argument and discussion off of some sort of information that they might have heard down the way. So just
which is so vague.
Yeah, it literally, like, is it real?
But
is it not real?
Like, we have to make it clear that this is not set in stone yet, so that's why we're sounding super vague, because it has to be like that. And as J&T said, it is just a theory. However, an informed theory, that's what I would expect out of Monty. He's a guy who probably hears things and probably gets some rumors, and so it sounds like potentially Riot's going to let go on minor regions, allowing them to become or allowing them not to take up import slots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we saw something similar to this last year when North America was allowed to have LCO, I guess, Oceanic players come over without counting as an import slot. So we clearly saw that North America will probably utilize this the most, and that's obviously what people are thinking is going to happen with this. And I think the initial instinct is for people to say, oh, it's just Riot doing things for the LCS again. And while that's not wrong, the way I look at this is I'm okay with it as long as it benefits more people than it hurts. And because I don't think it's just the LCS that's benefiting from this. What I mean by that is I think it's mostly the LCS league that is benefiting from this. However, the players that play in these minor league regions also benefit from this. And that's what makes me more okay with it. Do I want there to be a bunch of imports coming from minor regions over to North America? I don't know, honestly. My instinct is I'm okay with it, but it does hurt the whole NA talent idea that many North American fans are excited about. They want to see North American players do well. There should be less North American players playing in the LCS if these changes were to go through.
Yeah, one thing I will say about a point you did just mention there, in terms of kind of the representation of the league, if this were to happen, and I'll just circle back to the beginning because I just want to use the direct quote from Monty here, and exactly what he said, just so people don't misconstrue it. He said, Riot is going to open all minor regions at the end of this year to become residents of any major region. Once again, this is speculation, even though I did say Riot is going to. He doesn't know that for sure. But my whole point is, a big discussion that was going on when the import conversation really started to gain a lot of traction, which probably was, around last year in between spring and summer, after Cloud9 had kind of gone to MSI, came back, not looked very good. And then this was also at the time when Danny was really starting to pop off in the LCS. This was sort of towards the tail end of Season 11 summer. Danny was obviously a super notable player. But one of the main things that people always brought up is it kind of defeats the purpose of like the LCS, it being the North American League, to have all these various rosters and imported players into the league, which don't make it feel like it's North America. And to me, I mean, maybe this is just me, but I really don't think that any of that matters as long as the players and their personalities sort of can integrate into the league very, very well. I mean, people will always bring these up as examples, but Bjergsen and Jensen, despite them being from Europe and they were imported over here from Europe, from European teams, Bjergsen was formerly on Copenhagen Wolves, Jensen was formerly a sub mid laner for SK Gaming. These guys, almost from the get-go, have felt like North American players. And then we even have, players that came over later on. Someone like Impact, for example, who just feels like an NA player at this point. I feel like the times of him being the top laner for SKT, yeah, that's obviously super important to his legacy, but Impact is known as the stable top laner that's been in North America and has, been on the best North American teams for the last almost 6 years now. And, you have your most recent example in Sven, who just got his green card here in North America, and he's been playing here since Season 8. So, to me, when it comes to the identity of the LCS being a North American league, I don't really feel like, and once again, maybe this is just me, but I don't really feel like we're going to lose that, or the LCS is going to not feel like the LCS anymore just because we might have some more players or maybe whole rosters from minor regions coming over, if that were to be the case. One thing where, I won't go too far in the tangent in this discussion here, but if this were to happen, I actually do think that you could make the solid argument for opening up the LCS for more teams. And not even the LCS in that fact, but also potentially maybe the LEC, because we see all of the success that the various regional league teams have, like Karamine Corp, like BTXL. I'm trying to think of a few other ones. Misfits Premier is another good team. All these regional league players that have, proven results, who've gone over to the LEC and, had very successful careers over there. So I think you could definitely start the conversation now, should this happen, about potentially increasing the size of both the LCS and the LEC, because you could easily, take the best performing team from every single minor region, around North America, whether it's the LLA, the CBLOL, whatever, they could probably compete with the middle of the pack to the bottom of the pack LCS teams. I think people do recognize that those teams are very unlikely to touch the top of the league, but I think it would be very exciting to get new talent, new fans, and just kind of a new vibe and atmosphere around the LCS, where it does feel like we're on a bit of a loop right now.
I would be open to the idea of more teams. Normally I'm shutting that door, like, no, we can barely field 10 teams right now, and I'm still with that. I guess what I would say is I would want to see that we can successfully have 10 teams that have fans before we push that limit of, oh, we're going to have 12 or 14 popular teams or whatever it is, right? I would want to see, because right now the LCS has not shown that they can have 10 fan bases for 10 teams and actually have, a following for all these organizations. So until that point, I wouldn't say it makes sense to open up the league to more teams. Although I do concede that with this change, it's possible that we get there. You would need to see evidence first before that happens.
Yeah, well, one example that Monty did bring up that I think a lot of people, both ourselves and in the YouTube comments and talking within the Reddit post about, was currently right now in the LCS Immortals, they own the organization MIBR, which is a big Counter-Strike. They are involved in a lot of other games, but their premier team is Counter-Strike, and they're owned by Immortals, and they compete. They're a Brazilian-based organization. And in terms of adding this extra fire into the LCS, whether it be through fans or through players, I think potentially rebranding some of these, I won't say failed teams, but Immortals does kind of feel like a bit of a failed team in terms of integrating back into the LCS.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you remember when they came into the league in Season 6, they were first place in the regular season, both in spring and summer. Yes, obviously didn't go to Worlds that year. But ever since they've come back and to the LCS, formerly Optic, now Immortals, they really have had zero success in the entire league. And I feel like a rebrand for them could make a lot of sense, should this actually happen.
it's really, really needed. What does Immortals bring to the LCS?
Nothing. They're
What
green
does it
little.
bring?
They're green little helmet guy.
Yeah.
About it.
They don't have good. They haven't had good teams. They don't have fans or content or anything like it. It honestly is. So I agree that the rebrand would be really good. Although then you got to wonder, is it MIBR progressive?
I mean, maybe they might have
I don't
different
know.
sponsors, but I do think
Yeah.
one of the things that people will always talk about with North America recently is the viewership is continuing to decline, and that's completely true. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe with I want to go a little bit down a different road in a sec here, but maybe with the addition of, let's say, a team like MIBR replacing Immortals, that would just get a huge infusion of a bunch of Brazilian fans who presumably they would feel the top team in terms of the Brazilian talent that exists in the world right now, because they would be that premier team that you would want to play for and would be in a very competitive league.
So here's my fear with that, though. I'm totally okay if that were to happen. My fear is that I don't know how big the CBLOL is. Like, I don't know how many respectable organizations they have. So what I don't want to happen is to have all of CBLOL, for example, blown up just to add one team to the LCS. Right? Like, what if there's 5 or 6 really popular teams in Brazil? I don't know if there is or if there isn't. But if there is, then that would make me feel really bad about, like, because let's be honest, there's always things that are done to the benefit of the LCS. And like I said at the start of this segment, this is one of them. I would only be okay with it if it benefits other people. And if it's at the detriment to all of CBLOL by just blowing it up and ruining what could be 5 or 6 popular teams, someone stop me if I'm wrong there, then I'm not really so much in favor of it. I think that really hurts what is seeming to be a growing league. Like, all I've heard is good things about CBLOL over the past couple of years, and that their viewership is starting to contend with North America, which is a major region, maybe even surpassing it. I think. Maybe.
No, I don't know if they've
But you get what I'm
surpassed it,
saying,
but
right?
they do get.
Maybe they haven't. Maybe they haven't. But you get my point, though, right? That, like, I don't want to ruin maybe 5 or 6 popular teams if that's what they have, just to add one team to the LCS. I'd be far more okay if that was the case. But we got rid of. Well, you know, we have a lot of bottom teams that don't really have much fandom, you know, when it comes to, like, I hate to say it, but Golden Guardians is another example. Dignitas, like, these are also like, we pick on Immortals because they're the easiest one to pick on right now, but Dignitas doesn't do jack shit either. They're like, yeah,
Well,
their teams aren't as bad as Immortals, but they don't really contribute as far as, like, content or personalities or anything like that either. They have Biofrost, I guess.
I mean, to throw them a bit of a bone there, I would say overall they've been a more successful team. They've made playoffs plenty more times, and they have had some fairly notable players over the years. I guess they did have more.
So let's say they've been more successful than Immortals, but I wouldn't say the organization has been successful. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Just because you make playoffs maybe once or twice, I don't even know. Doesn't mean like it's
okay
to not have any interesting content. Like, you still need to contribute to the league.
You're doing them dirty there 2 times. More than that, they're probably like 4 or 5.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, but
they're not really ever interesting.
I guess what I am trying to say is there are in a league there are going to be some losers. Not everybody can be a winner, but not to continue the Immortals flame. But you don't have to be as stinky as Immortals. Like, they're going below the bar in terms of, like, I guess now I'm going to use the term, they're a failed team. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
I do want to turn this conversation a little bit because I think you pointed out something very important. You know, if making this addition to partially benefit the LCS, if that would, you know, ruin these other minor regions, I would definitely be against that idea, because I don't want to have to, as you said, uproot an entire league because, you know, to potentially get one team.
Leagues.
Yeah, but this is where I want to put the conversation to, because obviously the thing that everyone is going to talk about is when the Oceanic League was kind of absorbed by the LCS at the end of Season 10, beginning of Season 11, and we saw a lot of top OS players coming to NA because they were obviously much more valuable as they didn't take an import slot, and, you know, that's all well and dandy, but I feel like the story here is a little bit, you know, people aren't seeing the whole picture here. Because I was reading all the various YouTube comments on this MonteCristo video and comments on the Reddit post just talking about and using the OCE LCS example as a reason why you shouldn't do this because it destroys the league. And I want to stop right there and say it hasn't destroyed the league. And it did destroy the league that it once was. But they started the LCO. They started the LCO right back up again. The majority of the players who were competing in the Oceanic League at the time, I don't know the official acronym. People did say OCE, but whatever. All the players who were competing in that league continue to stay and compete in that league. They still were able to retain their international tournament spots. And overall, I don't think, OS was never the strongest region to begin with, so I don't know if you can accurately judge how better or worse the league is because a lot of the top talent have left. But what I will say is if you actually look at, I manually went through and looked at all the players who left OS and joined North American teams, both in LCS and Academy. Obviously, there were some OS players who came along before the whole merger happened, like Lost, like FBI, like Ryoma, and we do have some of them still in the league now. Lost and FBI are still starting on LCS teams. I don't know if Ryoma is still in Academy. I know last year he was on Golden Guardians Academy. I can't say with confidence if he's still in the league right now. But talking specifically about all the OS players that joined before the start of Season 11, there were 3 that played in LCS. There was Fudge, Raze, and Destiny, who at the time were Immortal Spot Lane, and 9 players joined in LCS Academy. And if you look at the snapshot right now, in summer, week 3, the only LCS Oceanic player we have is Fudge, and there's only 5 in Academy.
FBI?
Well, no, he came before. Well, he came before. I'm talking about the players who joined because of when the league got absorbed and they could be residents and everything like that. So the only one is Fudge, who's in LCS, and there's only 5 in Academy. King, Destiny, they're on C9 right now. Harry and Ayla, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but TL's Academy mid laner, and then CLG Triple. And that would bring a total of 7 players, with only one of them in LCS. And I would argue that Triple, King, and Destiny are probably on their way out. I mean, I wouldn't expect that Triple, King, or Destiny are going to be spending too much more time in the Academy because they've been in the system now for almost 2 years, and all 3 of them have played on the LCS stage for a significant amount of time. Triple subbed in for about half a season for FlyQuest at the time. King, we've seen him now, I want to say like 4 or 5 weeks in the LCS. Destiny, we've seen him almost in the LCS for like a year and a half. And then Ayla was subbed in for a few games. But my point here is that the league wasn't completely uprooted and ruined because of this situation. And the players themselves, the top OS players that were supposed to come into the LCS and be there and stay there because they're good and they're the top players in that region, that wasn't even the case. I mean, we only have one, which is Fudge. And he was clearly the best player in that region at the time. And everybody knew that because he was on Mammoth, went to Worlds, and C9 picked him up even before that. The whole move happened. He was already playing in their Academy system. So if this were to happen, obviously the big talent from the minor regions would most likely get picked up by the LCS, whether that's from the CBLOL, whether that's from the LLA, even if they wanted to go over to Turkey and, Germany, France, whatever. But I would think that the LEC teams might sort of work that angle as well. So it might be difficult to compete there. But my point is, I feel like it wouldn't be all doom and gloom if this were to happen, because the foundations of the league would probably still be there. The big organizations in OS are still there. The ones that were there before the merger and after the merger, they're still pretty much the same. There's only 1 or 2 that are very different. So I don't know. I don't even know if this would be such a bad thing. I think you could even make it so that if you wanted to sort of split things regionally, you could have for North America, for the LCS, now CBLOL, LLA, and what's the other one I'm forgetting? Well, I guess it's LLA now because they combined the 2. But let's say for CBLOL and LLA, those players now aren't imports for North America. And then maybe you go over to Europe in the LEC and say, okay, well, now you guys can take from the Spanish league, the German league, the Turkish league and everything like that. And that's cool for you. And then you go over to Asia, both the LPL and the LCK. You could say, okay, the LJL now is you can take players from there. And the PCS, you can take players from there. So, I mean, obviously, we're speculating here. We don't know how exactly it would work. But I don't know if it would completely blow everything up. I feel like everybody's sort of reached this point where it's like, oh man, it's going to ruin the league. Like all the minor regions are going to get screwed over. And like, I don't know if that's the case because the foundations are going to stay there. Yeah, they're most likely going to lose a few of their top players, but they'll get replaced sooner or later. So,
yeah, see, I don't know. The thing is, I don't know if you were to ask Oceanic players how they feel about it. I would say that they would probably feel as though their league is not the same as it was before because they've lost so many players. But on the other side, I do think it's fair to mention that you do get a greater chance if you're able to go to a major region without taking up an import slot, right? Like, you got to wonder what do these teams look like if FBI takes up an import slot all of a sudden. Like, that matters for 100 Thieves. He's probably no longer playing on what has been a top team for the last couple of years because they can't have Closer or Abadage on that same team, right? So that affects FBI. Like, FBI benefits from being able to not count as an import. Fudge, the same thing. So, like, there's a lot of opportunity for these players. And I'll even go to another one. Broken Blade. This is when he still counted as an import, but he proved that he was worthy of an import slot by going over to TSM. That's really difficult to do. Now you don't have to prove that necessarily that you're worth an import slot. It's more likely teams take a chance on you. And Broken Blade has been able to climb his way up to what is now the best team in Europe, or maybe not always. G2's kind of, I mean, they were the best team in Europe, but they went to MSI. So let's say the best team in Europe. And I think that's something that isn't an opportunity for a lot of minor region players. But can now be an opportunity with the restrictions being lifted if it comes to that. So there's two sides of the coin here, and it's really difficult for me to say which one I'm in favor for, because I do think it affects the league a little bit more. Those leagues a little bit more than you're giving credit for, J&T. But at the same time, I can't ignore that there's some benefits to some players that are getting opportunities that they wouldn't if it weren't the other way.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely obviously in the short term it would harm the league. I'm not oblivious to that. In the short term, it definitely would affect the league, and in terms of probably performance, both on an international stage and even at a regional level, because those top players are going to be missing. But I just think in the case, you look probably 2-3 years down the line. I don't know. I just think that it's probably going to even out. Like it'll be a good case study to look at the LCO in 2 years' time. And like I said at the beginning, they're a bit difficult to judge because presumably I think a lot of people viewed them as the worst region, minor or major, in the world when it came to international performances. Not to say that they're complete shitters and didn't deserve to be there at all, because, it's not like they were completely terrible. Like, dude, Pentanet beat Cloud9, and they even had a couple close games against some other teams. They beat Unicorns of Love 2 times, which were from the LCL. And that's another respectable minor region team who at the time Unicorns of Love was viewed to be a pretty decent team. So, I don't know. It definitely would hurt them in the short term, but I think it would be very interesting to see how the other leagues would also utilize this, because I don't think it is exclusive to the LCS. That's the other thing that I saw all throughout the comments and whatnot, was saying it's like, oh, this is just for the LCS. This is just for the LCS. Like, dude, this would help the LEC, I think, just as much as the LCS, maybe even more, because of the quality of players that you can find in the regional leagues. There are so many good players in the ERL that, like I said before, in the past have gone to the LEC and have turned out to be top players in their position.
But wait, I don't get what you're saying, though. You're saying players from the ERL, they don't take up import slots. I'm a little confused with what you're saying here.
Well, I just mean, I guess, sorry. What I meant to say was not ERL, but the other regions. I guess my main example would be Turkey in this case.
Yeah.
But even if those players were allowed to come to the LCS, like, that would be good for them as well.
Yeah, I don't agree with the idea that the LEC can benefit just as much as the LCS. I think this definitely benefits the LCS more than everybody else, but I don't think the LCS is the only region to benefit. Although I don't think, like, obviously China and Korea is not really going to benefit from this.
Yeah, I mean, they'll get a little bit. It's not like it's nothing. People import from the PCS. People import the top players from the LJL. I know, like I said this before, Arya got picked up by KT. I mean, that's just one player, and he was, one of the best players in their league, but that's better than nothing.
Yeah. However, they already had 2 import slots for those teams, right? So it doesn't really change much for them.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I want to say on this, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it would be interesting to see if we could see full Korean teams in the LPL as well. Because if you look on most Chinese or most LPL teams, they usually have 2 Koreans. Especially, the ones that go to the World Championship and end up being very successful. I think it wasn't up until, was it last year, where every single LPL team that had won Worlds had 2 Koreans on their roster.
Yeah, I think so.
IG had the Shy and Rookie. FPX had Join B, and their top laner's name, Gimgoon.
Yeah. Yeah, the last thing, because we've gone on for quite a while, but I do want to say that I wonder how this influences international tournaments because, well, like play-ins, right? Like play-ins is been a part of Worlds for a long time now, and obviously, like, what do they still plan on doing play-ins if the teams are like significantly worse if all of the talent is gone? Like, I think play-ins are already pretty uninteresting for a big not for everyone, but for a big portion of League of Legends fans. It makes me wonder if they are looking to get rid of play-ins if they were to go with this change, or maybe they just everything stays the same, and yes, the teams will be worse, but they still do play-ins just as normal. That's one thing that I wondered as well. Is like how this is going to affect international play and seeding and all that stuff.
I mean, I guess what I would say to that is the whole merger happened, and not even 5 months later, the LCO was competing at MSI. So maybe MSI would be a bit weird, but I would think that it wouldn't completely uproot the entire league. Once again, I don't know shit. I'm just a fucking guy sitting in a chair talking right now. I don't know anything, but
it's a lot of speculation.
From what,
It's tough to know because this is going to shake up a lot of things. It is difficult to read as to what this is going to change, and that's why I think so many people are discussing it right now. Is because there's a lot of unknown here.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, JNT?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to see it happen. I think it would be good. I think what they also should do is they need to have some sort of system for it. It can't just be every region, there's no more imports. You can do whatever the fuck you want. I think it does need to definitely be more structured than that. I would like it to be kind of regionally based, like they, I don't know, kind of split the globe up into 3 parts. There's the NA side of things, which would include the LCS, the CB LOL, the LLA. There'd be the LEC side, which would be the LEC, the TCL, the LCL, all those ones. And then there'd be, the Eastern side, which is LCK, LPL, LJL, PCS, VCS. I don't know. I think that would be somewhat interesting. So maybe you could still import players, but it would just only be from those specific sections. Probably doesn't make a lot of sense the way that I'm talking out loud about it right now, but it makes sense in my head. But I don't know. I think it would be really exciting. And in terms of the LCS, obviously, yes, this decision is very pandered towards the LCS, but it would make the LCS much more exciting for sure. Whether it's these different players that come in better, or these different teams that come in. If a new team wanted to come in, if they wanted to expand to 12 teams, by the way, when I was talking about expansion earlier, I wasn't talking about like double the size of it, like 12, 14 max.
Yeah. And the other thing you have to admit is that bringing over more talent from other regions to North America would improve North America. Now, you would have less North American players, which I'm sure a lot of people care a lot about, but it would improve those players, right? It would improve the region, and so I guess you got to give a little to get a little. I don't know. Yeah. It's an interesting thought, and I still don't really know what side of the fence I fall on when it comes to that. But really interesting idea, and I'm interested to see where it goes. Before we get to the team discussions, we will get to that in just a second. I want to remind everyone to hit the subscribe button because, well, I always like to remind. JNT and I come out with episodes every week except next week because pretty much all of Riot decided to take a week off, so there's not going to be any LCS next week. So we're taking a day off. But other than that, every Monday we do episodes live on twitch.tv/clownfiesta podcast. We usually go live just past midnight EST, around 9:15 p.m. PST on the West Coast. Except this week we had to go a little bit later for reasons. It doesn't matter. So if you want to catch us live, be sure to go follow us over at Twitch. And then if you want the VODs, they're always available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the whole shebang, where you get your podcasts, and of course YouTube. So be sure to comment and all that crap. Okay, JNT, let's get to the team discussions. This week, we noticed that there's a lot of partners, if you will. So you got EG on the top and you got Immortals on the bottom, right? 6-1 EG and you got 1-6 Immortals. And then there's pairs, right? You got 2 teams that are 5-2, then 4-3, then 3-4, so on. So J&T decided that we were going to group all the pairs together this week and kind of just decide which one we think is the better of the pairs. So that'll be the theme for this week's episode. But before we get to our first pair, EG is all by themselves. So let's start with Evil Geniuses. J&T, any thoughts on EG from this past week?
Yeah, EG's looking really good. They're looking like the definitive best team in the league. We'll get to it a little bit later, but after the TL 100 Thieves game, it does feel like TL's kind of sitting in limbo right now in terms of, what the trajectory of the team is and how, kind of, I think the general perception of the team, because, specific players on that team are kind of getting called out a little bit by the community in terms of their lackluster play, you could say. But to get back to EG, God damn it, I think just ban Corky against this team or what? I don't know.
So the thing is, though, yeah, I guess ban Corky, but then you saw like he's willing to just go with the Swain. JoJo did not have that great of a weekend on Swain, and so maybe I don't even know. Maybe Corky was banned that game, was it?
Nope.
If you ban Corky, you push him onto the Swain. Oh,
doesn't look like it.
Yeah, maybe that is the play. Maybe ban Corky and you're okay. Honestly, though, I think that's really like.
I was memeing, but yeah.
We see a lot of people have success with Corky, so I do think that's fair. But the nerfs are going to happen. So anyway, look, I did not expect EG to be on top at this point in the season, and I think them being on top going into the break is that is the best case scenario for EG. There's a lot of worry about MSI hangover, and I think I mentioned even last week that there's still a chance MSI hangover can happen. I think the fact that they made it to this week where there's a week off where they can get a little bit of a break helps them a lot, and being able to do it with sole possession of first place is huge for them. Again, I'm not totally willing to say they're out of the woods yet because we have seen teams in the past that start to fall off as the split goes on. But having a week off is really, really big for this team, I think, because they've said that they were going to need a break, and, well, they're getting it. And they haven't shown any signs of the MSI hangover. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like they've sort of fluked their way to 6 wins or like they're lucky to be 6-1. Like, no, this is the best team. They could even be 7-0 if they don't lose that game to CLG, a game that they probably should have won. So they're the definitive best team in the league. I think if you went player by player, I mean, it's hard to say, but I would definitely say that Inspired and JoJo are, to me, performing the best in their role. I think you could probably throw Danny up in that conversation as well. And Impact and Vulcan, I mean, they're probably somewhere in the top 3 in their role for sure. So pound for pound, this team is the best. Obviously, their biggest contenders are going to be Cloud9, Team Liquid, and 100 Thieves. They've already gotten wins over Cloud9 and Team Liquid. I don't think they've played 100 Thieves yet, so I'm not exactly sure about that. If they have, it's just completely escaping my memory. But to have definitive wins over the other top teams in the league, yes, your one loss was to CLG, but CLG's been looking decent as of late. But EG on top, they're going to stay on top, I think. It's pretty difficult for me to see how Team Liquid is going to really turn it around to catch them in the regular season. Obviously, the regular season isn't what matters. TL probably, they should recognize that their focus should be on playoffs and competing and contending for the World Championship. So I'm expecting EG to stay on top at this point.
So the one area where I'll disagree, I agree with pretty much all of what you said, but I'm not willing to give JoJo the number 1 mid laner spot just yet. Because as we mentioned before the split started, I thought it was really close between him and Bjerg. And Bjerg had a pretty good Swain game this past weekend where I think he was the reason they won that particular game. And I mean, yes, EG ended up winning when JoJo was playing Swain, but he was hard running it down that game. Like, mistakes that are going to look a lot more costly if he's not being bailed out by his team. Now, it's not, JoJo had a bad game, he's so shit now. No, I still think he's going to be in the conversation for best mid laner. But let's be honest, he got carried that game. He got picked off multiple times. The one time where he gets picked off in the top lane, Inspired comes in, hits a 3-man Kane knockup, and pretty much saves that fight, because that could have gone disaster for them. He gets picked off in the bot lane, sitting in the brush, and they ended up, that was the biggest throw of that game, where they almost handed the game to Golden Guardians. So there was a couple of times this weekend where JoJo didn't look the best. He even got hard outplayed in lane versus a Blaze Olive. Now, you and I, it's funny because you and I talked before that game happened about what the lane would look like if Yone played against Swain, and you were basically saying that you thought Yone would just smash the Swain because you would just outdamage, and that's pretty much what happened. So that was kind of interesting that happened. But yeah, the point is he still got outplayed, regardless of whether you want to call it a good matchup or not. He got hard shit on. So in lane and out of lane. So I guess what I'm saying is, even though everything's looking really, really good for EG for the most part, there's still a little bit of hiccups going on. But I fully expect JoJo to bounce back next week, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say about JoJo is, especially when it came to last split, his laning was always kind of his most worrisome aspect of his game, because he wasn't a guy that was always stomping lane or anything, but he did have his fair share of deaths in the laning phase and wasn't necessarily the safest player in lane. But what I will say is I think he is the best mid laner when it comes to late game team fighting. When it comes to macro, setting up around objectives, fighting around objectives. I mean, he is playing Corki a lot of these times, so it's a little bit easier to do your job than if you are playing, a more up in your face kind of champion, like if you'd have to be playing a Swain or you're playing an Ahri or something like that. So I know it's been a lot of games on Corki, but just from what I've seen in terms of his like positioning and objective control and whatnot, he's the best by far. Maybe Takui's rivaling him on his Corki game this past weekend against Dignitas, because that was like the best.
The Corki players are looking strong right now.
That was, dude. I mean, the champion's just broken, but that Corki game out of Takui, the Corki game out of Takui was like the best like last 20 minutes of a Corki game I've ever seen.
Yeah. To your point about this team, about EGE team fighting, I think they're the best team fighting team in the league. It is amazing how many times they are able to bail one another out. And just keep someone alive at the last second. It really is amazing how they do that. And like really close fights, they don't end up being 3-for-2s. They end up being 5-0, like where they're just completely wiping the other team. I guess ace, and they all live. So, and those are in close team fights. They manage to keep each other alive, which they do really well. Nothing more for me to add on EG. They look good.
Yeah,
nothing really changed, I guess.
Shout out LaMelope again, correcting me. They have already played 100 Thieves. They haven't played Team Liquid yet. Those were the two I got confused. I thought it was the reverse, but okay. Yeah, I mean, they still got TL to play, so if they beat TL, it's easy going.
Okay, now let's start talking about TL and 100 Thieves. These are the pairs. The first pair, both sitting at 5-2. J&T, who do you think is the better team? And we'll start with that team.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to defer to simple math here. 100 Thieves beat Team Liquid, so it's got to be 100 Thieves.
The thing is, so I can still agree with you, but like I don't think it's as simple as they beat them, so they have to be better. Like,
what are you talking about?
Because by that argument, you have a whole circle of suck thing going on. If for people that remember that meme, it's basically all the teams in the LCS do.
It happened as of last week, I think. I saw a post about it.
Cloud9 beat 100 Thieves beat TL, and TL beat C9, right? So like, if it's simple, like this team beat that team, they have to be better. It's not. You can't break it down that simple. But I do think that 100 Thieves' biggest problem, which has been Abadage this split, looked a lot better this past weekend. That doesn't mean everything's better for 100 Thieves. They're going to be great. Honestly, I don't really think they needed to show that much this weekend. They played the game against TL. TL had some lead, but like they had no real engage. So like TL was basically relying on GP ult and Renata Callista to engage. And like to me, that's not enough to really like. I don't think it's a coincidence.
What do you mean, dude? Santorin is the engage. He was running in on that Udyr. It was epic.
Yeah. And you just get kited, though.
I know. It was hilarious.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's a coincidence that you have an Enchanter meta and TL is having a hard time engaging fights right now. Because I think CoreJJ, even in week 1 when he's playing like the Bard and the Nami, he had a lot of nice pick plays, right? With the double bubble or the 2-man Bard ulti and whatnot. But I think that CoreJJ is able to shine a lot easier when he's playing the engaged champions, which is what we saw a lot of in the past. And so I didn't think 100 Thieves really had to do much this weekend. They played TL where they couldn't really engage any fights on them and then just waited. All they did against TL was just waited and went to Baron once, and they couldn't get punished at Baron because TL couldn't engage on them. That was pretty much that whole game. Nothing really happened. And then who else did they play? Did they play Immortals?
Yep.
I mean, need I say more?
I mean, yeah, everyone smacks Immortals.
They literally just put Someday. They said, "Happy birthday, Someday. We're giving you the counter pick," and then he shit on Revenge, and that was that game. Like I say, like 100 Thieves is the better of these team of the two teams that we have up on the screen, being 100 Thieves and TL. But 100 Thieves didn't really have to do anything this weekend. They just played really slow and just won the game. I know that's really weird, but that's exactly what happened. Go rewatch the games and tell me different.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the point where Core JJ doesn't seem to have the same impact on enchanters compared to his playmaking utility supports. Except for, I mean, sorry, not except for, including champions like the Bard, champions like Thresh, champions like Rakan, champions like Blitzcrank. Like those are some of his pocket picks, and you definitely see him struggle to have that same impact in these games. And I do think it is kind of going hand in hand with Hansama playing these more aggressive style AD carries because the meta has shifted a little bit towards that. We're seeing a lot of Kalista, we're seeing a lot of Lucian Nami, the Senatom Kench. We're seeing these very lane dominant bot lanes, or you're kind of seeing the flip side of it, where we're seeing like a lot of Ezreal Yumi, Zeri Yumi, Ezreal Karma. So you have these really polar opposites in the bot lane in terms of you're playing for lane or you're playing for late game team fighting, and there's really no middle ground. And TL sort of seemed to be on the side of playing for the early game, in terms of their bot lane, and they're just not having the same effect on the map because they have these very lane centralized champions that require you to roll your lane and then use that pressure to go get proper objective control.
Yeah. I wonder if it feels like, so because they have so much like lack of engage, it makes me wonder if TL just doesn't want to play the easy to execute comps for whatever reason. Like you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of last year, and this is purely speculatory just for the record. But do you remember last year when CLG just started winning games in summer? I mean, it didn't happen very long, but everyone was talking about the Bronze Zodian. It was like, oh, they just play these heavy engaged champions that are brainless. Yeah, but like
Banger.
it feels like TL is too afraid to play these easy to execute comps because I don't know, maybe they think they're better than that. I have no idea. I'm trying to figure out why they're having these comps and they're playing them with no engage. Like, don't you think TL would so easily be able to execute on these comps that have easy engage if they played a Camille Galio or whatever instead of relying on Renata and Kalista for engage? Renata ult is so slow. Like, it's not. I don't know. It's not enough engage for me to be comfortable with the comps that they're drafting. Anyways, let me just
Yeah, I mean TL's 5-2, and their players are good enough to where they're never going to be in a situation where they're missing out on playoffs, especially with an 8-team playoff. So it's not really that surprising to me if they are going a little bit against the grain in terms of picking things that aren't the most comfortable, or a new style that they're trying to learn. Because they're not in the position that previous CLG team was, where they needed to start picking up wins in order for them to make playoffs. They unfortunately didn't. At the end of it, but TL is going to be fine. I do think that with this team that has been built for international success, it makes sense to try to gain as much information as possible at a bunch of different champions, at a bunch of different team comps early on in the season. Should you want to reach your goals of making worlds and playing well at worlds, because now is the time to be testing out strategies and gathering information, not in the middle of playoffs or not towards the end of the regular season.
So here's my issue with that is, like, is it time to be testing that stuff out? Like, it's July. How much longer is it going to be before we thought they looked really smooth in week 1? We're like, okay, finally, this is what we expect out of TL. But like, how much longer do you need to give a team of full like veterans or all-stars or both? Like, how much time do you need to give this team to start looking like the top team? Because yes, they're 5-2, but some of those wins were shaky, right? Like, I wouldn't say they've been playing like a 5-2 team. I'd say they're probably playing like a 4-3. Didn't they beat FlyQuest, but that was because FlyQuest like threw the game to them, right? So like, I'm not looking at TL as if they have a 5-2 record. I think they should be like a 6-1 like EG, but I think they're playing like a 4-3 right now, and that's where I'm like, okay, you got to give them time, but how much time do you got to give them? Because sooner or later, you expect this team to be able to perform, but they're just like, they're playing like a good team when we know they should be a great team in this league. And that's where I'm kind of like, what the hell? Like, how long are we going to wait for?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think kind of happens all the time. Like, that used to be TSM's MO when they were back, the top team in the league. They were never the top team in the regular season up until right at the end of the regular season when they went on a big win streak and they started smashing playoffs. That was the story almost every single year. Was Cloud9 would finish first in the regular season, TSM would finish second on a big win streak, and then they would go on to
season 4 or 5, right?
Oh, I mean, this happened even with
how far back are you going here?
I mean, this even happened in like season 7 and whatnot.
Didn't it? I
Yeah,
don't remember.
this happened
I
all the
thought
way
they
up
were like
until season
17 and
7.
1 or some shit.
Well, they had that one split in 2016 summer, where they did, they were dominant almost the entire split. But in season 7, Cloud9 was the first place team the whole way. Then they lost in the finals.
Okay.
In season 6 spring, you remember that's when they had Yellow Star. They were 9-9. Everyone, they were the 6th seed. Everyone thought they were dog shit, and then but then they turned it on and they made finals and lost to CLG 3-2. But I don't know. I think it is a little bit troubling. Like you said, it is July, so you would hope that they do have their shit figured out. But them being a shaky 5-2 is better than them being a shaky 2-5, I guess.
Yeah, okay, sure. Okay, let me ask you this then. It's funny that you brought up the whole Yellow Star thing, because it just reminded me of how every time Doublelift talks about Yellow Star, he says, like, that guy was so shit. How was he at MVP?
That's just hilarious.
Anyways, yeah, besides the point. At what point is it panic mode for TL? Like, how much more time do we got to give this team before, like, for you specifically, JNT, how much more time until you're like, okay, TL's got to look like a top team now, and it's too late by X point?
I mean, probably like week 7, week 8.
Week 7. So if by week 7, and let's remind people that week 8 is the last week, right?
Yeah.
There's only 8 weeks in summer. I guess I think it was like that spring as well, but there's only 8 weeks. So if 2 weeks before the end of the summer split, TL is not looking clean, then you're going, okay, this is just a good team and they're not a great team.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing you gotta understand is you gotta reevaluate your expectations here, because at the beginning of 2022, everyone pegged this team as the clear-cut favorite, and everyone was doing that. And unfortunately, at the end of spring split, they were only the third place team, and they got beat out by both 100 Thieves and Evil Geniuses in terms of end of the season, rankings. And going into this split, while a lot of people still had Team Liquid on top, people by no means were underestimating EG, 100 Thieves, and Cloud9 if Cloud9 was kind of able to get their roster and figure it out. So to even have Team Liquid as the second best team in a league where EG is looking so dominant, I don't think that's a bad thing by any means. It just means that EG's better. I mean, if they might still be second place but looking good, I don't have anything wrong with that.
I mean, I would love for them to look good. I just don't think they look that good. Like, I don't think they're playing like a second best team right now.
Well, they're not. Although, the third
honestly,
best team.
I don't know who in North America is playing like that well right now, because I don't think 100 Thieves has played that clean. Second best team?
Oh no, sorry. I thought you were just saying what teams are playing well. I was just gonna say EG. That's it.
No. Like, I think it's just EG. It feels like the second best team in North America is up for grabs right now, I would say.
Yeah, I would say that too.
Yeah. Anyways, that's pretty much all I got for TL 100. Not a lot to say about 100 this weekend, because I mentioned they didn't really have to do much. Props to them. They took the win off of TL. I want to see more, I guess, because that game's not a game where you could learn a lot from, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird game, for sure.
But we both give 100 Thieves the edge right now, if we were going to take one.
Yeah, they'll get the slight edge. They'll get the greater than, but, that number could be 99-1, it could be 41-59, but it's probably
like if they were to play each other again, I don't know who I would predict, honestly. I really don't. But
I wouldn't know who to pick, but I would probably be influenced by whatever the draft is, for sure.
And the game just happened, so we got to go 100 Thieves. Okay, next up it is CLG and FlyQuest, both sitting at 4-3. Not the two teams that I would have expected. CLG we've known for a little while now, for this whole split rather. They've been looking a lot better, so that's not a huge surprise. Okay, we kind of predicted that they'd go. Well, did we predict that they'd go 0-2? I think so. Right? They had two tough matchups.
We both did.
Didn't they have C9 and TL? Yeah.
Yep.
So, like, 4-3 is still good for this team, but it's kind of coming back down to earth, I guess. But FlyQuest, I have to admit, I underestimated them. I did not think, and I don't even want to get too far ahead of myself here because I'm not fully bought in, but I will fully admit that this team is playing better than I expected them to. So I'll say that. Which team are you giving the edge, though, JNT?
I will give the slight edge still to CLG.
Me too.
Part of that is because I think both in the Cloud9, in both of their games this weekend from FlyQuest, it felt to me like it was one or two players specifically just kind of taking over the game, as opposed to our team smashed your team. I thought FlyQuest, the first game against Dignitas, literally Takui 1v9 that game. Go back, watch that game. His Corki, post, how long was the game? The game was 31 minutes. His Corki from pretty much 15 minutes onwards into the game was just absolutely perfect. His package placements in team fights, he was shooting magnetic rockets out of his fucking cannon and his little Gatling gun because he literally hit every single rocket on priority targets. I don't think that anyone on FlyQuest that was playing that well in that game. It was literally all Takui. I urge you to go watch back.
It was literally, guys, the comms, I'm telling you what the comms were. I wasn't listening to them, but I could tell you what they were. Guys, hold on. Corki almost has 2 items. We can hang on, right? And I think they gave up 3 drags.
Yeah, they gave up the first 3 drags.
Yeah. It was like, okay, we got our 2 items on Corki. Hopefully he can poke the shit out of them so we don't give up soul, and that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah.
They held on just long enough.
I want to read out the damage share for this game because I thought it was hilarious. So for FlyQuest, top lane 17.9%. Okay, then that's fair. Jungle 9.1%. Okay, that's kind of low. I mean, junglers kind of are supposed to deal damage. ADC 8%. Okay, he was playing. I think this was they counted ADC as Aframu, who was playing the farming Tahm Kench, but like that's not a lot of damage. Senna, the AD Senna, only 12%. Takui did 53% of the team's whole damage in that game. I have never seen a number like that. And it was also a short game. We see those huge damage numbers that are like really skewed in these very like long 40, 50, 60-minute games because you usually have like a hyper carry that's dealing all the damage anyway. But no, this was just a 30-minute game where Takui just completely rolled the whole thing in a matter of, 12 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, so Afro and Johnson have actually had a good split. I think they are much improved from last split. But when we get to the answering, they got hard shit on in that game, though.
Yeah, in that game they did.
From Dig. But when we get to the question of how Fly pulled off the 2-0 week, the answer's Takui. Mostly for the Corki game, that was his biggest performance. But he still had a really good game on the Ahri as well. And then obviously this is where you got to give some credit to the bot lane of FlyQuest because Johnson and Afro just hard outplayed Berserker's Ven.
Yeah.
And that was something else that I wasn't expecting to happen.
Yeah, to me, I did kind of said that at the beginning. Like the reason why I gave this slight edge to CLG was because I thought FlyQuest, it wasn't like their whole team just shit on the other team. I thought in the game against Dignitas, it was Takui 1v9, and in this game against Cloud9, it was Johnson and Afro 1v9. I know the both of us, we have been really high on Johnson and Aframu as a duo ever since they've been playing on Dignitas in Season 10. They played on Dig Season 10, not together Season 11, but are now reunited on FlyQuest in Season 12. And with the lackluster bot lanes that we've seen so far in the LCS and some of the unknown bot lanes that we've seen, aka Sven and Berserker, you kind of really saw the magic there from Johnson and Aframu in terms of, one, their laning together, two, the way they communicate with their team, how FlyQuest literally just picked up every single dragon. But I just thought it was a complete just domination nation from Johnson and Afro over Berserker and Sven. It was pretty clear. Like, you could tell that was like Sven's game where he got exposed a little bit because it was clear that he wasn't on the same page both with his lane partner and with his team.
The one thing I want to add on, though, is that for most of the time of the Johnson-Afro bot lane, I would say most of the time it's been Afro doing the heavy lifting, but in that particular game, Johnson was such a pain in the ass, man. His Jinx was hitting every single W, and he was perfectly, not zoning, his auto spacing was perfect, and he wasn't allowing Berserker to get his wave. He kept peppering the turrets down. Like, Johnson had a really, really good game. And so even though most of the time I'm giving the credit to Afro, I thought this was a game where I got to give it to Johnson because I thought he was the one that actually carried that game the hardest, although you have to give credit to both of those people in the bot lane. I want to switch over to CLG now because even though they had it 2 week, I still think they look a lot better in their losses. This is like, you know what I just thought of? Okay, JT, you've definitely seen the movie Space Jam, right?
The OG one, yeah? Not the new one.
Yeah,
right?
the OG one.
I haven't seen the new one.
Yeah,
Sorry,
this is
LeBron.
some copium take. Do you remember when MJ is playing baseball and the guy's like, man, you look good when you strike out? That's what I thought of about CLG. And it's like, man, you guys look good when you lose because actually, though, they do look so much better in their losses. Look, I can't pretend Poom didn't have a pretty lackluster game on the Amumu. But for the most part, like, they got a really good lead. Contracts was out jungling Santorin really hard in that game. Now, mind you, he ended up throwing because they went for the invade and didn't have mid prio, and Bjergsen got prio against Palafox, came over and pretty much swung the game back in their favor. But I don't think you would have ever seen that happen last split with how bad Contracts was. Like, there's no world. You couldn't have convinced me that there's a world where Contracts out jungles Santorin as hard as he did in that game. And so that to me is a really, really big improvement. And so I guess to CLG, I just got to say, you guys look good when you strike out, man. That's the copium take for this week.
Mm-hmm. The inting has been decreased a little bit, but Contracts, he's still got the juices flowing in his veins. Just a wee bit.
Man.
He's got it mostly out of his system.
That game would have been so huge for like shutting everyone up, myself included. If they beat TL there, that would have been so massive. Be like, okay, CLG's legit, and I do think that they were kind of well on their way for that. Even the game against C9, like, man, Berserker just outplayed them really hard on that dive. I thought that was going to swing the game in their favor. I was like, oh my god, CLG's about to dive. They're going to kill the bot lane. They're going to take the tower, and they're going to snowball this game. And Berserker just made a really nice outplay. I guess you could say Sven. He was on the Yuumi, though, so whatever.
What, you? Whoa. Don't discount his Yuumi game. You told me after this game, you're like, oh my god, it's the best Yuumi game I've ever seen.
That's not what I said. But also, I'm saying that particular play, because that particular play was just sidestepping and just dodging, and that's the Yuumi doesn't dodge, it's the AD carry that dodges. Sven did have a good Yuumi game, which is a really crazy thing to say, but I'm talking about that particular play, J&T. Okay. So you gotta differentiate here, because that was the game that was the play that swung that game. I think CLG was about. I don't
know if the game was going to get blown wide open because of that play per se. I mean, it definitely would have put CLG in a much advantageous spot because they did have at that time the stronger lane in the Senna Tom Kench.
I'm pretty sure plates were still up, right? So I think they get the double kill. And in most scenarios, I think they get that double kill, and I think they get a lot of plates.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the case. Unfortunately, I think they're getting mega outscaled, but I mean, maybe they can snowball the game, but I will piggyback off what you were saying. CLG's early games are actually looking really, really good, and their laning is also looking a lot better. Palafox, I'm not as convinced, but Dokla does seem to be a pretty good laner who can hold his own with the better tops in the league.
Still died in isolation a few times this week.
Yeah, a little bit, but
I hate to. I've brought it up the last 3 weeks. I hate to keep doing it, but that is his weakness. It does keep happening, and I think that
he's too used to playing Yorick from back in the day, where he can just 1v2 people.
I think there's a lot of excitement around CLG, so people are looking to say, look at Dokla, he's back, he's one of the best top laners in the league, and maybe he is one of the best top laners in the league, but he's going to have to stop dying if he wants to cement himself that way, and I think people are getting a little bit overhyped with what they want to see rather than what they're actually seeing.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, the 3 and 4 squadron of Golden Guardians and Cloud9. Well, Jamie, if the math worked before, shouldn't it work now? Golden Guardians beat Cloud9 in week 1. No, it doesn't work this time. It doesn't. That was in week 1. That was when Cloud9 didn't have their bot lane.
What are we talking about here? Are you saying that? What are you saying?
I'm saying the Cloud9's better than Golden Guardians.
Okay.
Despite them losing, because the math doesn't work here because they weren't playing with the real bot lane in week 1.
Yeah, you're going full copium. And it's still fair. It's still fair to say that they weren't playing with the actual roster. I will still say that right now I do think Golden Guardians is slightly better than Cloud9. I think that's probably a hot take. I think a lot of people are going to be like, Blue Jay, you're crazy, and that's fine if you think that. I just don't think C9's at their greatest right now, and that's totally expected, right? Do you remember last week I put the hold on Cloud9 because I was like, I don't think they're there yet. I think we saw a little bit of weakness out of them this weekend. And I also think that Golden Guardians was a lot closer to beating EG than people will remember. I think people will quickly forget that game that Inspired pretty much saves the game for EG with the 3-man knockup in that fight where Jojo Pion is caught. He should just die, and it should be another swing in the direction of Golden Guardians. I think Inspired kind of pulls that one out of a hat for Golden Guardians, or from Golden Guardians, whatever. But honestly, I would love to see these two teams play each other multiple times because I do think it's really close.
Yeah.
What team should we start with here?
Well, I guess we'll keep on the Golden Guardian point there with their game against EG because the draft was super exciting. A lot of people loved what they saw from it. I don't recall how it actually went down, but I think I remember the Senna Yasuo came in at the end of the draft. But it was
Yeah, I
super
don't remember
interesting.
the order either.
I just thought it was super interesting. One, because I think, if I recall correctly, Golden Guardians opened with Sejuani and Yone, right? After EG had first picked like Seraphine or something, or maybe they picked Gangplank. I don't even
thought it was
remember.
Yasuo first.
Was it
Are
maybe?
you pulling it up, or do you want me to pull it up?
You can pull it up. I don't really remember
I'll
at
pull it
all,
up.
but I just remember them picking the Swain into the double tanks of Sejuani and Zac, which I thought was fucking genius by JoJo, because Swain is just so good into these beefy tanks. Because you saw in a lot of these team fights, it's really hard to kill a Swain when you have a lot of low damage champions, especially in the early game, like a tank Sejuani, a tank Zac, a fasting Senna and whatever. So you kind of saw, while JoJo Pune was struggling in lane against the Blaze Olive in the Yone versus Swain matchup, he had a lot more success and impact in the fights where he was very difficult to kill, because Zac and Sejuani don't really deal a lot of damage.
Yeah, so the draft went EG took Seraphine.
Yeah, it was Seraphine first.
Then Golden Guardians took Senna and Yasuo.
Really? It was that
and
early?
Then it went, yeah, and then it was Gragas GP for the side of EG. And then they took Yone. And then Swain and Kane for the side of EG. And then the last pick was Zac.
Oh. I don't even remember that at all. I thought it was like completely different.
Fourth pick was Yone, fifth pick was Zac for Golden Guardians. Now, I mentioned that like Inspired kind of saved the game for EG against Golden Guardians, which is true, but I do need to throw some shade at Golden Guardians for contesting this. I think EG only had one drag, and I think Golden Guardians had two. And I remember, I think it was Azale, one of the casters said, like, Golden Guardians doesn't need to fight yet because Yone is about to finish his Infinity Edge. And I'm like, yes, I totally agree. No rush to fight this. And they contest the fucking drag. And I was like, oh, man. Because I really thought that we were going to see an upset. And I really did want Golden Guardians to win that game as much as I like EG. I thought this will be my chance to show that, like, yes, Golden Guardians is a top 5 team in the league. I thought it was going to prove me right. And they took that stupid fucking fight that they shouldn't have taken. And I felt really bad. So not all was on Inspired being the hero. Some of it was on Golden Guardians just taking fights they don't have to take. And then after they did that, they had Ole gets caught out in the middle of the lane on Yasuo, doing God knows what. I don't really know. There was a few mistakes. Also, Licorice really wanted him to just take Flash. Is that like crazy? I know that said Giovanni's not supposed to take Flash, but I feel like that's a game where if you just take Flash, things are so much better. Am I too noob, J&T?
No, you definitely take Flash. I mean, I don't understand this Ignite thing. I think it's good. I think in solo queue, it's fine to just take Ignite because that's what people do, and it's more useful. But in pro play, just take Flash.
It should depend on the matchup that you have. Like, it should not just
pro
matchup,
play,
but the whole team comp all together.
Just take
Flash. Exactly.
But I thought you were gonna go right away about the point about shit talking Licorice, because I don't know, I saw a lot of people flaming Licorice about like him dying early on the Sedge and whatnot. But honestly, man, he got like really unlucky, and I kind of want to credit Inspired for like the creative path that he did. Because EG had full info of the Golden Guardian start where Zac was starting on bot side, and obviously Zac likes to full clear bot side and top side and kind of sack the crabs because you're playing Zac, and how the hell are you gonna fight crabs? But basically, Inspired does this really creative path where he does red buff into Raptors, into enemy Raptors, knowing that he can clear his red and his Raptors and get to the enemy Raptors before Zac can do his other 3 camps, then takes enemy Raptors, is 3, goes top lane to dodge Licorice's ward. And I think one thing I saw people saying was like, why is Licorice warding not in the bush? Like, that's so stupid. And no, I think he's actually warding in the correct position, because
it's tough because Kayn can come from anywhere, man.
No, exactly. And that's partially true, because normally Kayn would sort of glide through that little Rift Herald wall to dodge any ward that was placed in the river brush or just outside of the river brush, kind of just in that general area. Kayn will dodge that ward as he's flying up through the wall. But since Inspired did the super creative path after getting that knowledge of level 1 and where Zac was starting, the game was just kind of fucked from there, because you could see Licorice wanting to push out that wave and recall, and Impact is kind of like baiting him to come in with like 200 HP, and Licorice is like, oh shit, I'm going to queue in and try to kill this guy. And then right at that time, he doesn't see Kayn coming across the ward. He sees a little Orby, and he's fucked. And he just gets dove on a stacked wave and gets doved on another stacked wave, and the game is just completely over from there in terms of topside. But I don't know. To me, I don't really put a lot of fault on Licorice there. Yes, you can put the blame in saying just take Flash, which I think you should. But
That's where I land. I'm not flaming Licorice for necessarily the gameplay.
No, but
I
I'm
am
not
more
flaming
on
for the
I wish he
gameplay. I
would've
just
had
think he got
Flash.
unlucky. Like,
Yeah.
it was just the whole fucking thing. I would credit Inspired more than saying Licorice is dog shit. How are you doing this? Like, all the credit there should go to
Yeah, I
Inspired
agree.
for like that level 1 prep and knowing that pathing, because maybe they know that Licorice likes to place his ward there. Like that could be some info that they have on the team.
And if we're being fair, I think there was a lot of healing on the side of. Well, there was a lot of healing, right? You had Seraphine. Like Ignite is useful in that game. I just think Flash is more useful. Even if there's a bunch of healing on the side, I think you can wombo somebody down with the knock up Yasuo combo that you have. So
Yeah, maybe.
I didn't think the Ignite was absolutely necessary, and I think Flash changes things a lot. But
I mean,
overall, pretty good weekend from them.
Yeah, the only champion I condone taking Ignite on over Flash is like Akali, because the champion just is super slippery and you have so much extra kill potential with the Ignite. But whenever you see like Ignite TP Camille or like Ignite Jax, like that was a thing, or like you're like, just fucking stop with that shit. Just take Flash, please.
Yeah. And before we hop over to the Cloud9 part, I just want to say that like we've been pretty hard on Olive and with fairness, right? I don't think he's been that great in the last split and some of this split as well. But I think Olive had a really good weekend, the bounce back weekend that I think Golden Guardian
He shut on Immortals
if they're going to be. Yeah,
Everyone
I mean
does
that he pretty much just won them the game with his Shurima shuffle. But you're right, it is against Immortals, and everyone kind of does that, so. Nothing huge there, but then he shit on JoJo, which is like, okay, well, JoJo's one of the better mid laners we have, so got to give the credit there. Yep.
Mm-hmm. His laning was actually really good.
Cloud9 now. We talked a little bit about Berserker kind of outplaying CLG on the dive there. I think that was huge. That really swung the game. We talked a little bit about Sven and the Yuumi. The one ulti against CLG that was on like that weird angle, I was like, wow. That was a really nice Yuumi play, which I don't think I've ever said before, but I verbally said that out loud and I actually meant it, which, I mean, that's got to count for something. Has anyone ever said that and meant it?
Yeah, no, Yumi's a fucking yoke. Remove that champ.
Yeah. What else happened with Cloud9 this weekend?
I don't know. I mean,
they got hard shit on by FlyQuest.
Yeah, I mean, we can go back to the game against FlyQuest, but to me, I mean, obviously, it wasn't like Cloud9 was individually winning their lanes or anything. It was actually FlyQuest who was doing pretty well in the laning phase for the most part. But, I mean, the story of the game we talked about at the beginning was just FlyQuest's dominance in the bot lane. And once FlyQuest kind of got that dragon stacking going and pretty much got the soul, you could, like, in that game, you really saw the power of Hextech Soul, because Cloud9 was trying their best to try and group up and force team fights, but anytime any Jinx W would land, hell, even a Braum Q, a Jace combo, it would chunk them out hard, they would all get slowed, and then they just had to back off and almost concede every single point of vision, which just led to FlyQuest taking literally every objective on the map. So I do think that, obviously, I'm giving a lot of credit to FlyQuest, but I don't want to say like Cloud9's completely out of like not being at fault here, because their players just didn't play very well, and that's kind of like,
I would credit FlyQuest before I gave the Bean Soup Award.
Yeah,
to
Cloud9
though, for sure.
That's what I was saying, but I wasn't also trying to say that Cloud9 like unlucky, whatever. We don't need to talk about it, because they just didn't play that well that game, and unfortunately the game just kind of got blown open through bot lane. You could see Berserker trying to do things. They were just too far behind, when it came to like 20-25 minutes for him to actually deal enough damage in these fights, because there was a couple occasions where he had people low, but he just couldn't get that last couple hits.
You know what's the craziest thing about that game? And I know this is supposed to be talking about Cloud9, but more focus on FlyQuest, was that they didn't allow Cloud9 to get the Gragas Yasuo combo off on Johnson, maybe even once?
No, not once.
Which is really difficult to do. Like, that's why I think you got to just give credit to FlyQuest for that game.
They did have the Braum, though, which is also helpful.
They had control, sure, but like you got to slip up at some point. Like, that's a pretty free combo. I think the only time it happened was maybe at the end. I don't even know if that landed on Johnson. When like they're already lost soul or whatever, and they're just getting sieged on their Nexus towers. So yeah, I do think Cloud9 has a little bit of areas to improve, but overall this weekend I think that the games out of FlyQuest were just that much more impressive. So I credit FlyQuest before I shame C9, and I think most people would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing with Cloud9, which is no hot take, is They still need time. This is only like week 2 or some shit of them playing as a full roster. So there's no crazy expectations out of C9. And while I do give Golden Guardians the edge right now, which may shock people, I think what doesn't shock people is that we all expect C9 to be better than Golden Guardians by the end of the split. That's no hot take.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Alrighty, the 2-5 squadron of TSM and Dignitas. TSM, they had a fat donut this week, 0-2. They had a donut against EG, no kills. I put a little bit of faith into this team last week. And of course, they've let me down. And
I don't think that faith is misguided, J&T. I don't think it's misguided because I do think the team is playing better than 2-5. And I actually still give them the edge over Dignitas, despite they did lose to Dignitas this weekend, right? I'm not making that up.
You're not following the formula.
TSM. The thing is, it's so difficult because I think that we asked the question in our title and even I think our thumbnail, like who's holding back TSM. And I think this is one of those situations where you're only as strong as your weakest link. And right now your weakest link is, in my opinion, it's tactical. And you could also throw some blame to probably every player on TSM, but the standout is tactical.
Yeah.
There's a couple, like TSM gets the lead comfortably against Dig. Was that the game where they invade and like Spica just hard out jungles them? Was that game, or am I confusing that with the other one? Who did they play?
They played Dig and EG. Definitely wasn't the game against EG because they got shit on. So
okay.
It must have been the game against Dignitas.
Yeah, so TSM does like the late invade, and then Spica just takes over the whole freaking jungle. Right, and River has nowhere to go pretty much. Spica gets a huge lead, and then they end up throwing in these fights where, like, to be fair, it's not all on tactical. Like, there was the one play... Oh, I'm confusing the games here. No, that game pretty much was on tactical. I guess Huni oversteps against Gamsu, the Gragas, and he gets caught under turret by the Gragas ulti. It's a little bit, but like that's not where they lost the game. They lost the game because Tactical walks up trying to get red buff, and like TSM's trying to leave, and Tactical's like, "Oh, let me try to auto this red buff one last time," and they're like, "Okay, we're gonna kill you." And then he blows his flash over the wall, and they chase him down and kill him anyways.
The other thing I wonder about that is because you always have those moments, kind of like when you're playing solo queue and you're playing the game, and if you're trying to click on somebody who's visible in a bush and like they're no longer visible, you'll then like move click towards them instead of auto attacking. So I was seeing a lot of people talk about like why the fuck is Tactical trying to hit this red buff, but who knows? It might have just been a situation where like he was trying to auto attack. Even it might have been even the red buff in that bush, but if he lost the vision of it, his character would have walked forward. But I mean, maybe he's like auto attack clicking, so that wasn't the case, and he actually was just inting for this red buff. Yeah, Tactical had a lot of blame in that game, though.
I rewatched that play, and I do think there is a chance that he misclicked. But when I was looking at it, I'm saying, I don't think you need to take the time to auto that red buff anyways. I think you just want to get the fuck out when the rest of your team is clearly getting out anyways. So yes, he steps back in, but even if he stays where he's standing anyways to auto the red buff, I think you're still trolling. So that's the way I looked at it, was like, I don't think he has any business trying to hit the red buff, even if that red buff is in the brush. So I don't know. I want to give benefit of the doubt, but I don't think I can there. And then there's like the flank play where he goes in between the two turrets. Spica, unlucky Spica. Like he just got countered by exhaust this weekend. But Spica predicts the pathing that River's gonna rotate mid, and he gets out with this. Like River gets out with the sliver. But I was like, that is a smart play by Spica. Again, he just comes up short, and then Tactical, I don't know, he goes for that flank and just dies. So like to me, that's another one where I'm like, God damn it, Tactical.
Yeah, well, I guess I mean for me that the Spica play that you're talking about, where he hides in the brush. One, I'll talk about what you were saying, how he kind of got cucked a little bit, but as he shot his Viego Q out, which would have killed River with the last shot, Biofrost gets Summoner heal off at the exact frame. I was like watching and looking at it, like the Q animation is in the air, but right before the damage goes through, you see Yuumi heal come in, and not like Yuumi heal like the champion healing, it's like the Summoner spell heal. So he got a little bit cucked there, but I was watching a Doublelift's YouTube video earlier today where he was reviewing this game, and he was kind of talking about that Spica play and how that most likely is something to do with team communication, because obviously Spica, he has, he has the forward thinking to go hide in that brush in case Dignitas takes some kind of greedy path to defend their turret, which they do. But unfortunately, nobody else on TSM is there to back him up. Maple and Tactical are hitting
So
the mid wave. He's
just to
saying
be
that
clear, he's saying that someone else should be in that brush with Spica, is what you're saying,
he
or is
was
what he's saying.
he was saying that there must be some sort of a miscommunication, either that Spica is just solo going for this play and not saying anything and just walking up, or that he might be calling for then that the other people on TSM are either calling off the play or they're not listening to the play, which to me makes a lot of sense because that was right after they had a little skirmish around that top area where Riftfield Baron is, and then you see TSM sees Dignitas on wards walking into their blue side jungle. They obviously don't have wards in the blue jungle, so they don't know exactly where they are, but Spica smartly just goes down, run towards that bush, and picks off River, who's taking a greedy path to try to defend the mid tower. Unfortunately, at that exact moment, Maple is valking into the mid wave to push it with Tactical, while Mia is also following them mid wave and not playing with Spica. So I'm kind of on Doublelift's side where he talks about like the communication TSM has got to be off there. And I know last week when I talked about TSM, and part of the reason why I was putting faith in the team was because it felt like their team play was getting a lot better and their individuals were also performing at a higher level. And I thought that they could win in spite of Tactical. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Tactical is still inting, and their team play seemed to have regressed this week in comparison to last week. And I thought that was, obviously Tactical had his poor moments, but to me, TSM just looks completely disjointed. Complete night and day this week compared to last week.
I got a hot take here. This is going to be a hot take for new listeners, not for people that have listened to us for a long time. I think Spica is having a better early game this split than he did in his MVP split. I think the team around him is a lot worse. Specifically talking about early game. I think he makes a lot more happen this split than last year, 2021 summer, where he was MVP.
I agree.
And I think most people would hear that and think that it's crazy. But I think he's making a lot happen. And yeah, that doesn't mean he's without flaws, right? There's the game against EG where he's playing Lee Sin and he takes the Q to kill Danny, and Danny gets out with a sliver, again, countered by exhaust. Like, these are plays where, like, it's just the smallest of margins that these players are getting away. And so I kind of give, like, benefit of the doubt of, like, oh, he almost, like, cleans up the kill and maybe the game with these plays. But I do think that ultimately you're being held back by an AD carry that can't stop dying, or a top laner that just isn't what he used to be. Like,
God, Huni's Gnar is so fucking horribad.
I expect him to beat Gamsu like easily, honestly, and you're not seeing that. So like there are some worries with the team, but yeah, I still think who do you give the edge to, JNT, out of these two teams? Do you give it to Dignitas now after the win, or would you stick with TSM as being the better team?
I mean, it's hard to say just because TSM, like, this past weekend is just really giving me, like, a bad taste in my mouth. I would say if I had to pick at this very moment right now, it'd probably be Dig, but I think that TSM in the long run should be better and can be better.
Yeah.
And I thought that was
close, though.
And I thought the evidence or the proof was week 2 when they looked so much better. I think that's one of the good things
about the league right now is that, like, I don't think it's obvious between these two teams. Oh, are we having some lag issues?
I think you just cut out, but go ahead. I was done anyway.
I was just saying that I think that's one of the good things about the league right now is that we can have a team beat another team, and we could still say, you know what, it's really close. And like, if they were to play each other again, I still don't know who would win. I think that's a good sign. Like, I think there's a lot of parity in the league right now outside of Immortals, honestly.
Yep.
So that's pretty good. Did you see Parth's tweet?
Yeah.
We went over Parth's takes and his tweets before. Yeah, Parth is. It took 3 weeks. That sounds like I'm flaming Parth. I feel bad for the guy because clearly, like, we've all been in that scenario before where we see a team and we think this team has more potential than what they're putting out there. I guess that team for me, this split would be Golden Guardians that we just talked about, or even last split, for example. I see more potential in this team than what they're giving us, and so I feel that frustration. But I think it's worse for him, because he was the freaking GM and coach, and he did a bunch of different shit at TSM. He had a bunch of different positions. But the point being, like, he's way more connected to TSM than I will ever be to Golden Guardians, right? So I feel that frustration as, like, he's the TSM fan that just... I feel that frustration. I get it. Over on the Dig side of things, where should we start with Dig?
I thought Gamsu, looked pretty competent this week. I thought he looked.
I was gonna say, even though I expect Huni to smash that matchup almost no matter who they're playing, Gamsu had a pretty good week. He had a couple of nice Gragas ultis, and yes, he picked off Huni, who hasn't been playing that good. He picked off Tactical for the game-winning fight in that game, where Tactical is getting picked off all the time. So yeah, sure. But the point is, those are still really nice Gragas ultis, and I think that Gragas ult is actually a really difficult skill to use. It's one of those things where it's like really feast or famine, right? When it's used well, it will really give your team the advantage, and when it's used poorly, you'll kind of int the fight, and he performed really well on it. So you got to give credit for Gamsu. I think his stock went up a little bit more after this past weekend.
Dude, I just got the memo, by the way. Night Harvester is absolutely broken. Like, they just recently buffed that item, and I was confused why people are suddenly doing these like Night Harvesters. Doing these Night Harvester builds, specifically this Gragas top build, where you go Night Harvester into Seraphs. Dude, that fucking item is broken. Like, it is absolutely bonkers. Like, I am expecting every champ who can build that item to build that item in the future because of how broken that shit is. Gives more AP than any other AP mythic item. It gives more ability haste than any other AP mythic item. Also gives the 5% AP or the 5% ability haste mythic passive. Does competent damage like relative to Proto Belt and Ludens. Has more HP than any other AP mythic item. Doesn't have the mana, obviously. That's like the biggest drawback. You don't have the 600 mana plus the Lost Chapter build path. But this shit's broken. Like, the item is completely overstated.
More Gragas.
I think so, dude. The item is so overstated. Like, I was looking at it today. I was like, why the hell are people building Night Harvester on these champs now? It's like, the fucking item's nuts.
Yeah. But anyways, so for these two teams, I think they're both better than a 2-5 team. I don't think that your faith in TSM is totally misguided, J&T. What did I say last week? I expect them to finish just below 500 is what I think I said. Maybe around there.
You said that.
I think that hasn't really changed for me, even though they threw a couple of the games past weekend.
I just don't think they have I just don't think they have as much time anymore to get those wins back when they have to play the teams like Cloud9. Yeah. They haven't even played Cloud9, I don't think, so far, right?
Oh, they're gonna beat Cloud9, right? This is when we do our predictions. That's the part where you say it's in the script.
No.
You always say it's in the script.
It already happened because they beat TL, so we're good.
Okay. Last up, Immortals. God, this is really.
I don't even want to talk about Immortals.
I'm starting to hate talking about Immortals.
Yeah, I don't even want
to. Because. What do we say about Immortals? They don't really do a whole lot.
They don't do anything. Literally nothing.
It really is actually difficult to talk about Immortals. They look really bad. You know what I will say? So I meant to have this take last week. I'm glad that I said it to you, because I feel like I'm not just pulling this out now after, again, they go 0-2. I said last week that, I said a couple of things. One, I said, not on the show, but just to you in Discord, I said that I think it's easier to predict this team finishing last this year than it would have been CLG last year. Like, I do think that they are significantly the worst team in the league, whereas like CLG was kind of like FlyQuest was really bad last year. I think Golden Guardians was also. I think both those teams were like all three of those teams rather were pretty close to each other. I think Immortals is far and away the worst team.
Yep.
And the other thing that I said is I think this is the worst. I don't know if I said this on a past episode, but it's the worst situation for a pro player to enter the league for Kenvi. Just because the jungle pool is so stacked in the LCS. Like, that's definitely our best role. And because his team is quite bad.
Yeah, Revenge
we mentioned
is
last
probably...
week how this team's super predictable. Yeah.
Revenge is probably the worst player in his role. Loss is probably the worst player in his role. Power of Evil, maybe he's not like the worst player, but he's by far and away the least impactful player, so he's not really getting any help.
Yeah, he doesn't make
from
much
Power
happen.
of Evil. And Ignar is pretty limited in what he can do as well, just because of the situation. Because, like, we're not expecting Kemi to go out and do these monstrous things and be this awesome rookie jungler who just suddenly pops off. But, you know, Ignar joining this team, you know, before we actually saw this team play, I think we were expecting Ignar to kind of bring back some of his magic and a lot of his picks. But kind of like Core JJ, I don't think this is really Ignar's meta. Like, it feels really lackluster in terms of his impact on games. Even when he is picking his more preferred style of champions, you can just see that those champions don't have the same impact that they used to before the durability patch. I think one of the other reasons why people always talk about how the games are boring and yada 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 is because we're most likely rolling out like Enchanter v Enchanter, and you can often get into big standstills in games because it's very hard to sort of get back vision control when you're playing Enchanter v Enchanter, because whatever team has the vision can just completely zone the other team, and the other team who's trying to get the vision doesn't have the hard engage to do so. They don't have that Leona who can just press R. They don't have the Nautilus who can just press R. They don't have the Rakan who can flash WR or flash RW. And so I think we're kind of seeing Ignar is just not really. He just can't do anything. Like it doesn't feel as simple as that, because like, yeah, you can do stuff, but it's just so difficult to do it in the first place.
When I watch IMT now, I'm so stuck on their kill count because every game they don't have any kills.
They have They have 2 games with 0, another one with 1, another one with 2, and another one with 3. I think out of their 7 games played so far.
So many of their games though, they're at 0 for like the first 25 or 30 minutes. They have 0 kills, and so I feel like when I'm watching this team, I'm so stuck on not even paying attention to what they're actually doing. I'm just looking at the 0, waiting for it to change. Which kind of sucks. And the other thing I wanted to ask, this sounds like I'm making light of the situation. I'm not, but I am curious. How many IMT players do you think have a job in the LCS after this split, like for next year?
I mean, have a job or could actually get a job, because there might be a difference.
I mean, how many do you think have a job in the LCS next split, next year?
Well, I don't know. Well, it's difficult to say. I would probably say 0. But I think that
0 as well.
But I think that Power Evil and Ignar are good enough to where they could be on the right team. I think Ignar is actually good enough to be on a majority of teams. Well, not a majority of teams, but enough teams that are looking for a good support player. I think Power Evil can only fit in a team that is maybe not necessarily built around him, but one that can succeed with a atypical mid laner.
So I've been a fan of Power of Evil for a long time, but I do think I have to concede now that it's gotten to the point where he just doesn't make enough happen, and it feels very CLG-esque of like the past, where like it's this veteran player that has kind of shown his peak now and isn't really close to that, hasn't been for a little while now. And I don't think that the cost that it would take to keep PoE is just not worth it. It would remind me of CLG's roster last year, where they had a bunch of veterans that just weren't there anymore, like Smoothie, Wild Turtle, Poe Belter. Like, it's a very similar kind of move. So I don't think PoE has a team next year. I don't think Lost has a team. I don't think Revenge has a team. The only one that I could see maybe, I guess Ignar could maybe go to another team. I suppose that's possible, because I don't think that... I don't think he's completely done yet, and maybe there's a world where Immortals says, like, yeah, Kenvy's struggling right now, but there's not really much chance for him to do much with it. He's against some of the best, like, all of the jungle pool's really good. He's still a guy that, like, you think has a future, and so you would try to build around him. I could see that being...
Yeah, I mean, if I was Immortals, in all likelihood, the season can change, obviously, but I would probably keep Ignar and Kenvy and get new players for the rest of the roles. That's actually what I think is probably the more likely scenario than none of them having jobs, is Kenvy and Ignar stay on the team and everyone else is gone.
Yeah. It was just something that I was thinking about, and so I thought I would ask you, because they're definitely
not getting on new teams, but
yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah. Ignar could, though. What's a team that could use a support?
Well, I think, obviously, I'm going to name teams that probably have a competent support that they wouldn't necessarily want to get rid of, but he could probably, he'd be good enough to play on, the FlyQuest, the Dignitas, the Golden Guardians, the TSM. I don't know if you would put him on, Cloud9. I mean, maybe go on Cloud9 if the whole Sven thing doesn't work out. That could be a...
Yeah, I could see that as well.
But, I mean, I don't think he's joining a 100 Thieves, a TL, an EG. Yeah. Probably not a Cloud9 either. I mean, it's...
I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, if we get to it. Okay, let's get into predictions for week 4.
Yep, week 4. Reminder, there's no LCS next week, so we are making predictions 2 weeks into the future.
Yeah, and no episode next week, like we mentioned earlier. So.
Yep, unless Reggie decides to, kill, a TSM worker.
Oh, man.
And it's, major news.
Careful, I know you're just joking around, but nothing's out of the...
yeah.
Anyway.
Let's just say I stopped myself from saying something else.
Yeah, let's just stop right there and get to our predictions.
Yep. I'm
The
21 and
Saturday
14.
games.
No. I'm 21 and 14. Blue Jay is 20 and 15. We're still, we had the same predictions last week, so nobody caught up anywhere.
Yeah.
But we need to update the people, especially the audio only people. Shout out you guys. First game Saturday, 100 Thieves versus FlyQuest. 100 Thieves.
100 Thieves.
Dignitas versus Evil Geniuses. Sorry, Dignitas, even though we both like you, EG's just better.
Yeah, so we both got 100. We both got EG. Now TSM versus Cloud9.
Cloud9.
I could see TSM winning this one, and I know people say that all the time. This is where I'm pulling a J&T, where it's like, oh, it's in the script or whatever. I don't have the guts, though, J&T. I tease you a little bit there. I don't have the guts to take TSM.
Okay, next up, CLG versus Immortals. Previously would be the banger of the bottom teams, but CLG not bottom team anymore. They're 4-3. Immortals sucks balls. CLG, let's go.
I wonder if there's going to be a point this split where I predict Immortals one more time. I maybe, but I don't see it happening. Anyway, CLG.
Yeah, I don't think I see it happening either. I don't even think. Okay. Not even for one game.
TL.
Honestly, not even if like one of the LCS teams subbed in their entire academy roster for like week 8. I'd probably say like.
Well, I think Immortals is going to be the team that does that. If I'm being honest.
True, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Team Liquid versus Golden Guardians. The last game on Saturday. Team Liquid.
Okay, me too. I was hoping you were going to do a madness there, but never mind.
Yeah. Maybe I will switch it. I don't know. But for now, Team Liquid. Then FlyQuest and TSM is the first game on the Sunday game. FlyQuest.
Yeah, even though I'm the one in the lead, I'm going to take the bit of a risk and pick TSM here.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to give up on TSM if they lose this game.
I don't think your faith is that misguided. And while I do think FlyQuest is playing better than I anticipated, I still don't really think that they're what are they? They're top 5 right now. I don't think they're a top 5 team.
Yeah.
Anyways, should be a close game. CLG versus 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves.
Same.
EG versus TL.
The big banger. EG versus TL.
Oh man. I want to take an upset, but like, how can I I just said the whole episode long that like EG's on by themselves and TL's not even looking like a 5-2 team. Like, I can't do it. I can't. So, EG over TL for me.
I'm gonna do it. Why not?
You're gonna do it? Okay.
Yeah.
So J&T has Team Liquid. Then Cloud9 versus Immortals. We're both going Cloud9.
Yep. We might as well
Golden
just
Guardians
skip the
versus
Immortals
Dignitas.
games at this point.
I am going Golden Guardians over Dignitas.
Damn. Oh my god. Am I going to pick another upset?
I don't know. You tell me.
I am going to pick Golden Guardians, but once again, will admit the outcomes of the games on Saturday probably will affect my decision of picking this game.
I just ask you, do you think Golden Guardians is just not as good as I'm giving them credit for? Is that what you think?
Yeah, a little bit.
Or do you think Dignitas is better than?
I don't think Golden Guardians.
I want to know.
Yeah, I don't know if Golden Guardians is as good as. I mean, I don't think they're bad, but I mean, I don't think they're. I think. Well, they're not better. I mean, I'm not talking right now. I'm talking about like if we can project a little bit. They're not going to be better than 100 Thieves, EG, Cloud9, and Team Liquid. So already right there, they're max for me that they could reach as top 5, and I think they have. They're going to be in contention with teams like FlyQuest and CLG, and potentially I thought it was going to be TSM, but they fucking went 0-2, and like they're 2-5 now, a little bit out of the hunt. But I mean, I think it's probably likely that they'll finish around the 7th place, plus or minus 1. So.
I predict them to finish 5th still, but I will say that I do think their ceiling is 4th, because there is a world where Cloud9 doesn't pan out. Now, I think Cloud9 will pan out. I've said that many times. But there's a world where it doesn't, and I could see Golden Guardians taking that spot if C9 is not, if things aren't going well for them. But I guess that's to be determined. Okay, quick news now?
Yep, we got a little bit of quick news. First up, Zazel, former... No, was he on No Org? I don't even know if he was on an amateur team. Whatever. Former EG support, former Cloud9 support. He's back on Cloud9. as a
I
working
know
as
he
a
was on
positional
an
coach
amateur
right now.
team or something. I just don't remember if it was no org, if it was something else.
I'm gonna look it up right now
Um,
because I gotta know.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I remember seeing Zazel in like the Cloud9 content or whatever. Like, so I was like, oh, that's cool. And then
oh, he was on
they made the
Solified.
announcement.
That was like one of those
Oh, that was the
amateur
team
teams
that
that
didn't
got
get
scammed.
paid.
Yeah, they got scammed or something.
Yeah,
Poor
yeah, it
Zazel.
was.
At least he's getting a steady
Um,
paycheck on Cloud9.
yeah, and when we saw this, you brought up the point of like, hey, didn't C9 have Sven Skaren or something?
Yeah,
And
they
we found a little bit of an update on that.
or well, if people remember, they signed him, I think, at the end of Spring Split as like a positional coach slash like reserve player in case of like emergency. And I do recall when Sven Skaren was talking about it on Twitter, he was saying something along the lines of Jack was going to potentially help him look for a team in the summer split. And obviously he didn't get on a team, but it just made me think of like, hey, where is that guy? Like, what is he doing right now? Is he even on like an amateur team? I know he was playing Champions Queue in the first split, but I looked up on his Twitter and a tweet he put out on June 2nd, which would be right around a month ago. He was saying that he's currently in the process of getting his green card. So maybe we see Sven Skaren back in the LCS next year as a resident, which would obviously bring up his stock a little bit, although how high even is it right now?
It's tough because I don't think he had that great of a split with EG his last split. And also we mentioned that the jungle pool is pretty stacked right now. So I think he would have to take like a look, we're going with Kenvi, but we'll have you as backup. Might be what Immortals says kind of thing. So I think he would probably make a league minimum contract for a lower tier team. If that. Maybe a lower tier team wouldn't even want to pay that actually. Maybe he'd make a minimum contract for still like a C9 or something, just like a, hey, you're kind of academy, but you're kind of a coach sort of thing, perhaps.
Doing a little Sven from Spring Split.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Alrighty.
But anyways, interesting find from you on Twitter. So pop off award to JNT250. Next up,
there's a rumor, and I see a rumor. I'm going to use that term very loosely. I saw this tweet on some random ass Twitter account from this random ass guy that doesn't have many followers. I say many followers relative to what a notable person might have, but he posted this rumor saying that 20 plus people were laid off from TSM and that could potentially be related to TSM's failed crypto investment / strategy. Obviously, the big reference point is TSM partnering with FTX at the start of 2021 summer, I think it was, when they signed that big naming rights contract with FTX that was like $200+ million, where the TSM became TSM FTX. Obviously, they can't use that in the LCS for something contractually. It conflicts with their contract in the LCS, but everywhere else, they're TSM FTX. All their Twitter profiles and all their content, whatever. But know that there's another big exodus of TSM employees that are gone, and now it's because of this whole crypto shit. I'm sorry, bro, but like this shit just posted on at Crypto Bros Taking L's. That's one of my favorite Twitter accounts and has been for the last year because crypto's a fucking yoke.
I just think it's amazing that how many episodes have we done like this year? Like 20, 25 maybe? We've probably talked about TSM losing staff or firing staff or letting go or a player left or something in like 10?
Yeah, at least half.
like that is amazing, right? Somewhere around there. That is crazy. That's what I find most interesting. And even though, look, it's just a rumor, like it happens all the time. So that's why it's way more believable. Now we don't know if it's absolutely true, but worth bringing up just because it's insane how much we talk about TSM letting go of people or people leaving or whatever. Also, when you were talking about the issues that they have contractually with the LCS, the reason why they can't have FTX in their name is not just an LCS thing. It's because it's an LOL esports thing. You're not allowed to have crypto on like the global stage. So you can't be you could be TSM FTX in like North America, which is why like the LCS has the FTX sponsor. Remember like the gold differential thing.
You're
but when it comes to international, you can't have it on like your jersey or whatever. So you can't have TSM FTX on your jersey because I don't know, something to do with LOL esports. If people were wondering the reason for that.
Yeah, I do. I remembered loosely, but I couldn't I couldn't spit out the specifics like that. Just I didn't want to misrepresent the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you. Last up, some sad news.
Oh no!
Especially for us, considering we're not too far away from what we're about to talk about. Worlds 2022, obviously being held in North America. Let's go North America. Play-ins happening in Mexico City. Quarters and group stage happening in New York, and the semifinals, unfortunately, no longer happening in Canada, over in Toronto. They are now happening in Atlanta, Georgia. Sad, because we were probably going to go to that.
That hurts. So here's the thing. It hurts. Let's be honest. It hurts. That really sucks. Now, apparently the reasoning is like it's hard to get double entry visas or something like that. So because they were going to Mexico for play-ins, then going into the States for groups and quarters, then they were leaving the USA to go to Toronto for semis, and then going back to San Francisco for finals. I guess that's like you're entering the US twice, and I guess double entry visas or something. I think that's what the article said, was like really a pain in the ass. So that sounds to be the reasoning. A lot of people were on it's Trudeau's fault right away, but I don't think it has anything to do with that. Or at least that's not what they said in the article. It didn't really seem to... They didn't expand very much, so... but from the minimal stuff that they did say, it seems like it was the double entry into the US that was the problem. So let's say finals was in Toronto, that probably would have been okay because you didn't have to re-enter the US again. If the finals were in Toronto, you go finals and then you go home. But that seems to be the issue there.
Mm-hmm. And obviously holding the finals, they were never going to switch it up and hold the finals in Toronto because they always have them over on the West Coast.
You gotta go somewhere in California, man. Like that is just where like this big portion of LCS fans come from, because that's where it is. It's in LA, right? So San Francisco's what, like 3 hours away or something? I don't even know. I shouldn't even guess, but I think it's that somewhere like that.
It's a little bit.
The other thing too is like,
well, I was just gonna say it's a little bit notable that they're not doing it in the formerly known Staples Center, now Crypto.com Arena. Fucking hell. Crypto
maybe that's
XD.
why, because it can't be for LL Esports. Maybe because of the thing we just talked about with FTX. Maybe that's why.
I mean, I guess that makes
Crypto
sense,
Arena.
but I guess that makes sense. But come to think of it, how often are they like on the broadcast saying, "Oh, we're here and we're at this place"?
I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe they could just omit
just
that.
A thought.
Yeah, no, but the Staples Center, no pun intended, has been a staple of the World Championships in North America.
Nice.
So yeah, I feel dirty about it. I feel bad.
Okay, the last thing I'll say, look, it hurts that they're not going to Toronto for semis, but like from where we're at, we're going to New York anyways. We'll drive. It's like 10 hours to New York. That's doable. Shout out to all the people in like fucking Calgary or the Canadians in like BC. Like that's really, really far, right? Maybe how far do you think San Francisco is from like Vancouver?
Not that far.
Is it comparable from like Toronto to New York or not really?
I mean, I'll look it up right now.
It feels like it'd be further. But anyways, shout out to the people in like Alberta that like they are not getting there. Like it sucks that we don't get it in Toronto because it's just a couple hours away. But at least we could still go to New York, and New York's gonna be a fucking blast. I can't wait. So that like I feel like we're not too hard screwed if we're in Southern Ontario. We can make the drive to New York.
Vancouver to the Chase Center, which is where they're holding the finals, is never mind. It's actually longer than I thought it was. It's 15 hours.
That was gonna be my guess. Actually, 15. I am a geographical beast. Awesome. Or I just got lucky. One of the two. Yeah. So that's it for this episode. I think it was a fun episode. I enjoyed this. We won't be back next week again. That's the third reminder. So we will be back in 2 weeks.
Unless Reggie does something bad.
But we're gonna keep pumping out episodes. Yeah, unless Reggie does something bad. We'll leave it at that. We won't get specifics about Reggie. We won't give him any ideas.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, this was fun. This was a fun episode. The lag is coming back, so let's close her out. We'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. This has been episode 91 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Goodbye.